Well, we'll get at her. My dad always said, son, it's easy to take off, it's harder to land, because he was a pilot. And so I've flown all over the Arctic and all over with my dad for years and years. And so, because he had a plane before I was born, so I grew up with airplanes in the backyard, like some people have a second car. But he'd always say, yeah, you got to cut it short. You got to figure out how to land. Well, okay, we'll try to do that. Anyhow, let's get going here. So this session here, I thought we'd talk about dogs. So I don't know if you know, but there's 340 official breeds in the world of dogs. 197 belong in the AKC, American Kennel Club. These are official breeds. Now here's what's interesting about dogs. Yes, I'm equating us to dogs, okay? So probably not a really cool thing. Anyways, so you have all these different breeds. They were bred for something, some specialty, most of them. For example, dachshunds, because that's what we always had, wiener dogs. We had dachshunds. They're bred to dig out badgers and gophers and stuff like that, so you don't have to teach them. Our dog, we used to just make the gopher noise. You probably remember him, Fred, Gus. We just make the gopher noise, and man, he would just dig, and there's just dirt flying all over the place trying to get at these things. He knew that. We didn't have to teach him. We didn't have to tell him any of that stuff, because it's inbred. Then you've got other dogs, greyhounds. What are they good for? Pulling dog sleds, right? Not quite. So they're bred for speed. But you do have your huskies, which are bred for pulling, and cold weather, and everything about them is bred for that kind of an environment. And then my wife and I were in New Zealand one time. I was doing a camp meeting down there, and then after the camp meeting was done, I had to then go do a men's retreat down in New Zealand. So they realized it's probably, you speak 11, 12 times, and then you got to go and speak a bunch more times at a men's retreat. And so they said, we're doing something. We know you like to fish. Okay, we got that one down. And they said, so we're going to send you down to this sheep shack, they called it, on Lake Benmore on the South Island of New Zealand. They got good fisher, but stunning. You think Lake Louise is turquoise? This place was phenomenal. And then in the background, you have that big mountain there in South Island. I forgot what it's called now. That doesn't matter. Anyways, so we go down to this sheep shack. Well, it's not a sheep shack. It's like really, really cool. And we have to drive 40 kilometers in off-road to get to the thing. It's just nothing out there but sheep. And the whole front of the building opens up like this, so you can just sit there like you're on a deck, but you're actually inside. So we're down there for 4 days or whatever. It was another couple came along with us because they brought a boat so we could go fishing down this lake. But anyhow, so one morning I'm hearing all this bang, 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 and then honk, 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 and then ooga horns and whistles like a train whistle. And I'm thinking, what is that? I come out and, well, here's a helicopter. And they would hit a horn. They have 10 different horns on this helicopter to scare the rabbits out from under the bush. And then they all have 12 gauges, 2 guys hanging out the side. So that was pretty interesting. So I waved at them and said, come down. So they came and landed, because they said that for every, I can't remember what the numbers are, but for every 10 rabbits, it displaces the feed for 1 sheep. So they figure it's financially viable to use helicopters to get rid of rabbits so they can have more feed for sheep. Anyway, so we talked to them guys. That was pretty interesting. And then the next day, we're sitting in the sheep shack. It's just beautiful out. Weather's perfect. And I'm kind of looking down this draw towards the lake, which is just below us. And I see these sheep all coming down, one by one. And then clusters of them. And pretty soon there's hundreds of sheep all coming down into this one corner of this, whatever, there's a fence down there. And so what the world are these sheep doing? They're dumb. I've been around sheep enough, in New Zealand and Australia and stuff. And so I went outside and I'm watching, and these sheep are all coming down. Then I see there's 3 dogs. And the dogs are absolutely pushing these sheep down. And I'm figuring, how in the world do these dogs know how to do this? So then I look, because the dogs would chase them, but they don't push them too hard. And then they'd squat down and they look up the hill. So I looked up the hill too. Well, here's a guy way up on the top of this mountain with some sort of whistle, and he's just going like this. And the dogs are chasing these sheep, so we had to go down there. So he finally came walking down a long ways from up on this mountain. So we go down and visit him, and he says, oh yeah, no, the dogs do all the work. And we're like, really? We can't even teach our dog to, well, I don't know, dachshunds, we're never very smart. But anyhow, So we're asking about this. Well, how do you train them to this? Oh, you don't have to. As long as you put a new dog with the older dogs, they figure this all out. Because they're bred for it. So if a dog is bred for particular activity, it's not work to them. They don't have to learn anything. It's built in. I used to go bird hunting with one of my buddies. Yeah, I know another barbaric thing I do, but whatever. So he had like German short-haired dogs. And we'd go out, whatever, hunting. And these dogs were just so smart. Boy, they'd see a bird and they'd point at it. And I said, how long does it take? So I don't have to train them much. You just kind of give them the idea of what the rules are, and they got it. They're already there. So the point is this. So I realize that in their DNA, there's instincts, canine instincts for these different breeds to do whatever they do. And so I got to thinking about it. If of course, man can take and manipulate these genetics, and turn a dog into some specialty, like they got dogs that, are normally meant for chasing foxes or whatever, that now smell for drugs in an airport and all that. So they teach them these different things. But there's something inside. Smell, it's all about noise. Nose, it's all about getting a reward for smelling. So, but there's something in their DNA that's natural for what a dog does. So I got to thinking about that. So I thought, if God put into, maybe not the specialties of a dog, but if God is putting things into salmon to know how to swim upriver to the very creek or whatever, like my wife's mother used to be the administrator for the University of Washington Department of Fisheries and Oceanography. And so I had free access to all these renowned professors because of her. So I'd go down and visit these Dr. Donaldson and these guys, and I'd love it. But they would release the salmon smolts out of a pipe at the University of Washington Fisheries Department. And 4 years later, these salmon are not only in the pond below the university, they're jumping at the pipe. Thinking that I got to get wherever that's coming from, because they give a mark. But God put that into those. And birds that fly south, and butterflies that do amazing things. Our daughter-in-laws, they have milkweed in their yard down in Southern California, both of them, and they get them to the monarchs to lay things, and then they put them in a jar and they hatch them out and whatever. It's enhancing butterflies. But they got all these natural things. They migrate, they do all these things. So I got to thinking, did God put anything into us? Could there be divine instincts in us as humans? That if we're not in the realm of what He's designed us for, we're never going to be happy. It's like putting a dachshund in, and they do this for fun. But we used to go to whippet races. They're miniature greyhounds. And they have this pom-pom that goes around. They have them all in a fence, and the dogs, they got to hold them here, and the dogs are just so excited, and they stick them in this thing, and they're just screaming their heads off, and they all have a little vest on. And then they open, and the gates all open up, and then this pom-pom goes around. They run like 40 miles an hour all the way around. That's how they race. Well, for the fun of it, they'll take dachshunds, put the little vest on them, and so now you got these short little legs just beating around the corner trying to, and they're trying to pull the pom-pom by hand. It's got to be so slow. But if they're in their realm of what they're good for, they enjoy it. You take a greyhound and hook them up to a dog sled. Are they going to enjoy it? No, they're going to hate every minute of it. They enjoy it, they're good at it, and they have a sense of purpose and relevance. Actually, dogs have that. So I got to thinking, and I did a little reading. They claim that 80% of our makeup, personality-wise and character, is genetic in our DNA. So I thought, what if God implanted something in us that is there as a natural outcome of what we're all about, so that when we do that, we have a sense of relevance, and when we do whatever that divine instinct that's implanted in us, if we follow that path, we're going to have a sense of relevance, we're going to have a sense of purpose, we're going to have contentment, and all that by just following in the path of whatever was created in us. I think weird, I admit it, but at the same time. So I was looking into it all, and I realized, biblically, yes, there's something built into our DNA. It's to save, and it's to give. That's built in. Save people. Give to people. How many have ever found it a waste of time to help someone else? When you're all done, did you get a reward? Well, there's sometimes people are extra grace required and they're extra demanding on your time and energy, whatever. But overall, to give and help someone is the most complete feeling you're going to get. You can't buy that. That's built in. To save something, save someone is built in as well. And when you do that, you have a sense of relevance. So God has built into us these innate senses, these divine instincts to save and to help and to give to people. That's built, and when you do that, your whole life has a far more greater sense of relevance. So what did he say we are? We're ambassadors, tells us 2 Corinthians 5. It says, we're ambassadors. What does that mean? We're representatives of God. So if you spend your life chasing what you can get out of life, things, money, whatever else, I've done all that. I've been all over society's ladder. Because see, here's the thing. And I don't want to digress. That's probably a rabbit trail. So my wife has to keep me on track when I get off on this rabbit trail. Here's one fact. For everything God has ever instituted, every thought, every belief, every command, whatever, Satan has come up with a fake, forgery, or counterfeit. Do you agree with that? Absolutely, without a doubt. So, one time I was studying all this about society's ladder. It's an imaginary ladder, society, but it is strong. As soon as you get out of school, high school, whatever it is, you're stuck on that ladder. And what is that ladder all about? It's about climbing. That's what human nature is. We're all about climbing. And we've heard keeping up with the Joneses. I can put that in a rather crass way. All that is we're on society's ladder, and we look up, and all we see is the rear ends of people above us, because that's what you see if you look at somebody on a ladder. And we want to get there. So how do we get there? Right immediately in front of your eyes, if any of you have ever been on a ladder before, right in front of your eyes is what? A rung, a ladder rung. That could be a next goal for money. Could be a next a goal, achievement in your job status, working your way up the ladder. Could be all sorts of things, because society is built on a hierarchical system. So we look, here's a rung. So we struggle to get that rung. We work harder, we do whatever, we get that rung. Now we move up a step. We look up, there's the rear ends of the people above us, but they're moving up now. And we're trying to get there. And society's ladder is a terrible place to be, because you never get to the destination. And how do I know that? Because I've hung around with 5 different billionaires now, and when you hang around with these people and you realize they're a billionaire now, Albert Chung in Hong Kong, they're a billionaire now, and they're fighting for another million. Why? You know there's nothing up there. You're already there. But you're fighting for another rung. Speaking of Albert Chung, I'll tell that story really quick. Some of you may have heard this before, but I get a phone call one day from a guy, very good English, but I knew he was Asian accent or whatever. And he phones me up and he says, yeah, you Herb Larson? Yeah, I'm Herb Larson. We get talking a little bit, realized he's Albert Chung, renowned billionaire in Hong Kong. Phoned me about wanting me to do some environmental project for China, to do the developmental work and stuff. So as soon as I hear who he is and that he wants to talk to me, I'm thinking, oh, wow, I get to meet this guy, this renowned guy from Hong Kong. No, first thing I thought is, got to be a divine appointment. What am I talking to him for? And so, make a long story short, I don't have to fly to Hong Kong. Usually the peon goes where the big guy is. He says, I'll come over and visit you. So 2-3 weeks later, he books his flight or whatever, private jet, whatever. I didn't ever ask him that. He comes over to Vancouver. He lands on a Saturday afternoon. What does he ask? Can we get together? I'm busy. Let's get together right away. And I said, can we do it tonight? Yeah, sure. I said, where do you want to meet? And he said, well, how about my house up in the British properties? He's got 3 houses in the Vancouver area. Well, if you know anything about the British properties, it's the most prestigious probably part of Vancouver. So I get the address, I drive up there, right next door to Jimmy Pattison, who's another billionaire, and he's got this behemoth mansion with a half an acre, tennis courts, swimming pools, and nobody's ever there, hardly ever. His kids come over and ski once in a while, so they stay in that house. He's got another one in Delta, and he owns the whole PGA golf course, and his house there too. And so anyways, so I go out there, and I drive up to his place, 3-car garage, 3 vehicles. There's a Porsche Carrera, There's a big, long, stretched Mercedes fancy car, and then there's a Jag, some fancy Jag there. Well, a few years ago, I'd be like salivating. I wouldn't be able to talk when I got to the door because I want what the billionaire has. Really, that's the way my life's always been, pretty much. So I look at those cars, and I look at this behemoth mansion, and I figure, okay, do I go to the front door? The garage door is open. So I walk through the garage door, into the garage, past these cars, and I ring the doorbell on the back door, and very quickly, Mr. Chung comes to the door. And, welcome. He's just really a nice guy. And he says, come on in. I walk into the boot place. I think they call it that, whatever. You come into the garage, and there's just this room to take your boots off. Sitting in front is a carving this big, solid ivory, 24 karat gold overlay, the most incredible piece of artwork I've seen anywhere. And I'm like, wow. I said, man, that is unbelievable. I mean, it's not cheap carving. This thing is phenomenal. So I said, that is unbelievable. Oh, he said, do you appreciate art? I said, oh, yeah, no, I love art. And so anyway, he says, well, would you like to see some of my other artwork? I said, well, absolutely, I'd like to see your artwork. We go into this house, and he starts taking me through, and every part of his house is a different kind of artwork. Well, wouldn't you know it? Because I've been to all the art centers, because promoting my own stuff as well as I used to broker art as a sideline thing. So anyways, I've been to Chicago, New York, Toronto, all these places. So I go walk around, and wouldn't you know, there's an original Erte sculpture. I know who Erte is. So I'm talking about, and I'm talking about these artists, and he's like, I can't believe you know about artwork. I says, yeah, I got quite a collection myself because all the money I used to make on my work, I would buy other people's artwork. And so anyways, and don't get upset, but yeah, we got one room that we can't use. So anyways, so he takes me through, and God has it all set up ahead of time that I know something about all these, not all, every artist, but enough of them where he's like blown away. Because nobody appreciates this, but he's got somebody in his house now that knows what he's bought. All this, millions of dollars worth of art. We get back into his dining room, and we're there and he says, oh, do you know anything about calligraphy? I said, well, I'm sorry about that. I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about Asian art, and that's all in his dining room. So I don't look dumb. I reached over, and I just felt the paper on one of them. I said, just look at the length of the fibers in that paper. He says, how in the world would you know that? I says, well, I do stone lithography as well, where you print on stones and stuff, and I have to buy fine handmade papers, and look at the fiber, and he says, oh, you wait here. He says, you know who this artist is? I said, no. He said, he's the most famous calligraphy artist in all of Asia, and he died in 1984. Well, you know what happens to the price of work? So he says, you wait here. So I'm standing in his dining room, and he goes downstairs, back a few minutes, has his box about this long, about that square, dusts it all off, opens it up. He says, this is one of his finer pieces. I don't even hang it. And I'm looking, and he explains it all, and he rolls it back up, puts it in the box. He says, I want you to have it. And I said, oh, man, I'm sorry. I don't want your artwork. I don't want your artwork. He says, no, I want you to have it. And I said, well, I'm saying no, but at the same time, I want yes, right? So you try to find that line where you don't push it too far. I did go home with it that night. I can't even insure it. So anyways, so he gives me this piece of art. And from there, we then go out on his deck, and there's Vancouver and up the Fraser Valley to where I live in Abbotsford. It's just like, and there's the whole harbor with ship lights. It's a Saturday night out there in the harbor. So there I'm sitting on his deck outside. He has a woman he hired to come in to make us hors d'oeuvres and all this stuff. So we're being served out there on the deck. And I'm sitting before him, and I'm thinking, okay, this is not a business deal. Yes, it is. But at the same time, this is a divine appointment. How am I going to breach the subject of God with the billionaire? So I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I figure, boy, this is going to be a tough one. So I thought, let's just get right to it. So as soon as we sit down, he wants to start talking business. He said, well, his Western name is Albert. I said, Albert, before I do business with anybody, I got to tell where I am coming from. I'm a Christian. I said, I know. I said, I've been shafted by more people who claim to be a Christian than not. But I just want to tell you, I'm a Christian. And I said, but here's what it does for me. And I started explaining what it's like to have God as a partner. I said, you know what it's like? When you're the pinnacle of your mine's a little empire, his is a big one. When you're the pinnacle of the empire, I said, and you come home and you've had lawsuits threatened against you and you had things go sideways and people have kicked sand in your face. And I said, you know what it's like to be able to come home and wish that you could offload on someone else. Just get out from under the pressure. I said, whether God is real or not is totally irrelevant. My belief system allows me to come home and unload on someone bigger than myself so I can get it off my shoulders. And I'm explaining all this. And I explained finding my story I shared this morning in a brief. I shared that with him. He starts to cry. Well, I've been to Asia a number of times on diplomatic visa with the Asian government on consulting on biofertilizers one time. Another time was remediating mercury out of their contaminated environment and stuff. So they don't show those kind of emotions at crying. And at first he's just got a few tears and he's kind of looking around and, trying to whatever. And then finally he just loses it. Because I keep going down that path. I said, yeah, no. I said, when God's your partner, I said, the amazing thing is psychologically, at a minimum, you have a big advantage over everybody else in life because you have this belief system. I know God's real, but you don't have to believe he's real just to have that because I don't know where he's at. So he starts to cry. And after a while, he gets his composure. And you know what he says to me? He points right at me and he says, what you have is what I desperately need and want. He said, I got a void in my life and I can't fill it. It's like I got a hole in my heart and I can't stop the bleeding. Amen. A billionaire is telling me, as business people, you never let the other person know how badly you want whatever they have. It's the cardinal rule. If you want to buy something off, say, I don't know, I'm just scratched. Yeah, no, I have to fix it up. And you act, I can take it or leave it. You really want it, but you never show that. What does he say? You have what I desperately need and want. And it hit me so hard right there, the paradigm shift. He had what I've always wanted. And now he's telling me I have what he wants. And the world is that way. They're desperate, they're hungry for anything that gives them a sense of purpose, true purpose. There's no purpose in making some money. So back to I found my way back, Tammy, back to the society's ladder. Normally I have to turn to her and say, where was I? This time I got it. So society's ladder. So we fight to get up there. So what's at the top of it? I don't know. My telescope isn't that good. But I know guys like Bill Gates are up there. What is he saying? Oh, I'm going to give all my wealth to charity. Elon Musk, I'm going to live in a small place. I don't need anything. I want to live as much a minimalist as I can in spite of all my money. Okay, you're telling me something. And you listen to all these people. And then my wife and I have been to parties in Hollywood and Beverly Hills with celebrities because of my art. And so when you're hanging around these people, you realize they're desperate. They're desperate for anything, a sense of solidity, a sense of relevance. And they're on society's ladder. So here they are. You watch them in the rag magazines or whatever. Not that I read those, but you can, in the grocery line, you can see what's going on in their lives. And here they are. They've always wanted to be famous. They always wanted to have money. They always wanted to have the Rolex watch collection and whatever it all is. They finally get it. What do? Self-destruct. Start taking drugs. Start taking alcohol. Start dumping spouses and finding new ones. Pell-mell chaos. That's what's up society ladder. So why do I want to be on that? So one day I'm thinking about society's ladder because when I witness to the secular people, I get into those kind of things. They need to understand, what am I chasing and what's up there? Have you ever looked to see what's up there? I've been around enough wealthy and affluent people to know there's nothing up there. And so I was thinking about this one day and all of a sudden it hit me. Could this be a counterfeit for something else? Society's ladder. And as I was sitting there contemplating and calling down the Holy Spirit to let me see what it could be, it all of a sudden dawns on me. The Holy Spirit gave it to me. Jacob's ladder. What's at the top of Jacob's ladder? God. What's on the ladder? Angels going up and down to support us on our trip towards God. We know what's at the top. We know there's something amazing up there. Bona fide, proven, because Jesus paid the price. That's the proof. So what about society's ladder? Why does it appear to be going up? Because it's not. Have you ever heard of what vertigo, depending on how you want to pronounce it? Vertigo. My dad being a pilot, you know, when you got instrument ratings years and years ago, you had to go under the hood, they call it. So now you're flying, and whoever's instructing you, they put the airplane in a weird attitude, and now you got to figure out instruments only, how to get it out from that attitude. You're okay, you're flying into a cloud right now. Boom, you can't see a thing. Vertigo hits you. What are you going to do? Well, you look at the gauges and you figure, okay, I got to make a 180, whatever. Vertigo. When I took scuba diving in university, then there's a long course. Nowadays you can go for a day and get your thing and go diving, but back then it was like a whole quarter long. But we had one of our instructors who was a professional diver, and so he would talk to us about vertigo. So we'd have to do these exercises. They'd stick us in the big swimming pool at Walla Walla, long this way because that's for laps, and then it goes down in the deep diving end. They'd put a lead weight. They'd let us all see. It's down against that wall, 3 feet out from the wall, there's a lead weight on the ground. Now you're going to go up on this side of the pool. You're going to put a washcloth in your face mask. They stuff it all full. And you're going to go find that lead weight without any orientation. Well, that's going to be easy. And then they spin you around a couple times. You got your scuba tanks on and everything. So my turn. I just start finding a corner. Just keep following the corner. Eventually you can feel yourself going down in the deep end. Now you know you're getting close. So I find a corner and I'm following it. Yeah, well, yeah, there it is. Whoa, now we hit 90 degrees. So let's go down this one. Oh, now we're getting deeper. So I'm following all this through. And I don't know if you know this, but you can hear laughter through water. Because I'm going like this. I know where it is. I'm going like this, pat, 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 pat. And it's got to be here. I mean, it's got to be midway down this wall. And everybody's laughing. So finally somebody comes and taps me on the shoulder. I come to the surface and look. I was going vertical on the corner of the pool. And it's down there. I mean, certainly the lead weight isn't going to be on the wall. Vertigo hit me. So what does the devil do with society's ladder? He creates vertigo. Oh, so my diving instructor said this. He says, for an example, you got to come up. Nowadays, they got fantastic buoyancy compensators and everything. In other words, to offset the lead weight and blah, blah, blah. But back then, we just blow it up or not, you know. And so he said he was diving in the Columbia River one time, and the rule is you always buddy dive. Because if you have somebody else that gives you orientation, you don't get vertigo so easy. And so, anyway, so he said he and his partner got separated because Columbia River is a muddy river down there, around Vantage and stuff. They were down there diving. And he lost sight of his, and he says, like that, I was hit with vertigo. And he said, I had a panic, and this is what I do for a living, but I had this sort of a sense of panic. So I thought, better boot it to the surface to see if my partner's up there so that we can go, get reoriented and go back to do what we're supposed to do. So he says, I start booting it to the surface. And then I realized, something doesn't seem right here. I'm going the right direction, but something doesn't seem. So he stopped, he said for a second, and he thought, He's a smart guy, so what he does, he takes his weight belt off and sticks it out in front of him. He says, I looked at it, and the leads were all going uphill. And he looked at that for a long time, and he says, I thought, no, it's wrong. I'm going up, and yet the lead is pointing up. He said, so I had to overcome every common sense thing I got and start orienting my body around so that lead weight is going down to get up there. The devil has taken society's ladder and make it look like it's vertical going up, and in reality it's going down. The harder you chase that, the further you're going down towards destruction. That's what we're dealing with. And Jacob's ladder is the exact opposite. So the society's ladder, if we think in life, we can just pursue and we're going to somehow, that next rung's going to bring us happiness. Nope, been there, done that. Then the next one after that, nope, been there, done that. Survival of the fittest kicks in with everybody on there, and if somebody's want to pass you, stomp your hands to get you off that rung so they can take it. That's life. So why would we want to be on that when God offers so much more? And the Bible's full of all the examples. I mean, the commission, because I was talking about dogs. If we go to Matthew 10, here's a commission that's given to us, Matthew 10, verse 16. And it's a scary, it's sort of a, I would call it a sort of pathetic commission, okay? Not that God's pathetic, but the commission seems somewhat weird, somewhat pathetic. Here's what it says. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Excuse me. Can anybody here figure out what happens if you dump some lambs in a pack of wolves? What's going to happen? It's going to be mutton all around. And God is saying, I'm going to send you as sheep amongst wolves. That makes no sense. Who would do that? Who would even expect us to do that? It's a slaughter. So God, you're saying, I want to send you out on a slaughter. You're going to be feed for the wolves out there. It says, be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Oh, but then it says this, verse 70, beware of men, for they'll deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in the synagogues. God is saying, I'm going to send you as sheep amongst wolves. Don't worry about them. I'll tell you where the trouble is. It's back in the synagogue you just left. Because if they see the people in the synagogue and the church, if they see you out there, the wolves, they're going to bring you in and scourge you because you're hanging out with wolves. Lots of other texts like that. If we go over Luke 10, it's an easy one to figure this one out. John 10 and then Luke 10. And we get similar thing here, but now we're talking about 70 disciples. We want to see, do they make it back? This is what God wants to do for us. And so we go to Luke 10, verse 1. It says, and these things the Lord's appointed another 70. So here's the story. Jesus sends 70 disciples out 2 by 2. Here's the commission. And he repeats this sentence, says, don't carry a purse or a script or shoes. And then it says right here, same verse, same type thing, before I send you forth in verse 3, as lambs amongst wolves, not just sheep, lambs amongst wolves. So this commission is like, you got to be kidding me, God. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for me to be sent out as a lamb amongst wolves. So how's this going to end? How many are going to come back? That's what I want to know. And we go down verse 17. And the 70 returned again with joy. Number one, they returned alive when they're sheep amongst wolves. Isn't that good news? And it wasn't just that they returned, oh yeah, that was rough, I'm maimed, I'm beat up, I've been chewed on, I've lost my fur. No, wool, whatever you want to call it. They come back with joy. God's trying to give us more than a hint here. He's trying to say, what I have planned for you, what's in your DNA, the divine instinct, is 1,000 times more. My ladder versus society's ladder is 1,000 times more rewarding than you're ever going to encounter in your life. And though I could go on and on and on with Scripture. But I want to end here because I got to finish. And my wife told me to tell this story. I could tell you stories for next week? Doesn't matter. That's when you work for God, it's just like amazing what happens. But I haven't told this story in a long time. And Marie, I think you guys have probably heard it or whatever else in the past. But I was flying to Andrews University to speak at the seminary there. I've been there a few times doing that. So I have to leave from Seattle, fly to Chicago, grab another puddle jumper down to South Bend, Indiana, and then drive up to Andrews. So anyways, I'm in Seattle, and to get to Seattle, it's 3 hours drive for me. It's not a big deal. But it's a better route than leaving Vancouver and then go Vancouver, Seattle, or Vancouver, Denver, and then Denver there, and then blah, blah, blah. But I got a border to cross, so there's a contingency of time I got to plan in there. What if the border's busy? So I got to give myself an extra hour and a half in case. And then when I get to Seattle, it's the rush hour, the traffic in Seattle is second worst in the nation in the U.S., so you got to give yourself a contingency of time there. So this trip I go down there, I drive to SeaTac. Border, nobody there, boom, right through. Traffic in Seattle, hit it perfect, boom, right through Seattle into the south side of Seattle to SeaTac. I'm there 3 hours early. Well, not a problem. Why? Because I like watching people. I imagine you guys go to the zoo and you enjoy that. Well, I'm way above that. I go to the airport and watch people. They're far more interesting. So anyways, I'm there and I'm just watching people, and I love it. My wife and I do that a lot. We'll go down to the lake somewhere and sit on a park bench. What's more entertaining, watching the ducks? No, the people. Far more interesting. And then we come up with stories. Oh, I'll bet you. We're trying to come up with what the story is about them. Oh, I'll bet you they're having an affair. Oh, I'll bet you they've been married a long time. I'll bet you whatever. We just have all these discussions. Anyway, so I'm down there. And I'm looking around, and I see this one well-dressed guy off to my right. And he's, I don't know what he does. And my wife's family calls me Mr. 20 Questions, because I got a wild curiosity. Imagination and curiosity. It's a bad combination. So anyways, I got this curiosity I always got to know. And I'll literally ask people, oh, what do you do? Or where do you live? Whatever. I just get, like this morning at breakfast, at the continental breakfast at the hotel there. There's another couple sitting in there. Well, I'm not going to sit there and just try to wonder where you guys came from. What do you do? So we carry on a conversation the whole breakfast. We're talking the whole time. So anyways, and they're from Valemont. Whatever. Talking about Fairmont, sorry, whatever, yeah. So anyway, so I'm down, I see this guy and I'm thinking, wonder what he does. He's he's quite put together. I always look at watch and shoes, and then you decide, are they really authentic? Are they just wannabes or are they really? So I'm looking, oh yeah, he's wonder what he does. So I'm thinking about this. Well, I got a long time to think too, right? I mean, I've got 3 hours to wait before the plane flights. And so I'm looking at people and I'll glance over, I wonder where he's going, and stuff. And so getting closer to when we have to depart, this guy gets up and he walks away. That's okay, I'll let him do that. He leaves, a little while later he comes back. But what does he come back with? This is where the story goes sideways. He comes back with a big sweet roll wrapped up in cellophane. Now, I'm not a health nut. If I go fishing, I'm not going to just look at him, right? So whatever. That's digressing. But a big sweet roll like that in cellophane, it's just like, you got to be kidding. And a can of Coke. Now, can you imagine eating a big sweet roll and chasing it down with a can of Coke? And I'm not a health nut. But even as a non-health nut, that is like, you got to be kidding me. And so I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden my opinion of him has gone downhill real quick. And so I look over and I said, that is disgusting. What are you going to do? Bring that on the airplane? And so then they call our flight. And this trip, I don't fly, because when I'm traveling for God's work, I take the cheapest flights, economy, the whole 9 yards. But there's one thing that I fight for, aisle seats. My age makes me have to go to the back of the airplane more often than some people, but whatever. So I get the aisle, and if I'm really lucky, I get the bulkhead, the front row where there's a bulk, you get more leg room. It's a cheap wad way of getting first class. Anyway, so I get my aisle and I get the bulkhead. I'm happy. So I load. But as I'm going, I look back to see what the guy's, when's he boarding. You know what he's doing? He's jamming the whole sweet roll in his mouth all at once, hanging over a garbage can like a little hydraulic ram with his thumb to get it all in there, and then trying to chase that wad down with his can of Coke. Wow. What a pig. That's exactly what I said. What a pig. You do that in public? I mean, I had a higher opinion of you before. I can't believe you'd do that. That's how worked up I got. I get on the plane, I settle in, I sit down, I'm watching, because the entrance door, did we lose our feed? There we go. The entrance door is right to my left. So I'm wondering, when's the pig going to come in? And nobody. Maybe he's on a different flight. I don't know. Hardly anybody's coming anymore. Guess what? Who walks in? Him. And I'm just like, and what is he doing? He's licking his fingers. So in public, he's licking his fingers after jamming the sweet roll down and drinking a can of Coke. And now he's coming in. Now here's what was shocking about it. I had an empty seat next to me, and there's a guy at the window, and I'm talking to him already. And he comes in, and he takes his ticket and looks like that as soon as he walks in the door. What does that mean? He's looking for a seat near the front, where I am. I'll give you 3 guesses as to where he sat. Don't even have to guess. He comes in, puts his bag up here, sits down here. I don't say hello. He doesn't say hello. I'm like, I jam my arm on the armrest because I was here first. I'm taking this for the flight. It's part of my first class package. And I'm disgusted with this guy. And he gets his Bose headphones out, puts them on. And I thought, good. And so anyways, I'm sitting there and I'm seething. And I'm not normally that way. With Fred I am, but normally I'm not that way. But and so we take off. Good. He's got his headphones on. He's entertained. And then they come around to pass out the free I got my own, but I take the free ones because I'm a cheap one. So then I gave them away to other people. But anyway, so they're going to give you the free head earbuds, whatever you call them. So I said, oh, yeah, okay, I'll have a pair. And then I thought, well, I'm going to watch this movie. I don't care how dumb or whatever it is. It wasn't the type where you can choose on that airplane. It was on a screen. And so I grabbed the headphones and I thought, I probably better not watch this movie or whatever it's going to be. I don't even know what it's going to be. I should probably think about what I'm going to talk about when I get to Andrews University. So I thought, well, usually, when I'm on an airplane, I have an experience. I meet someone, I get to share Jesus. That'd be good. Not today. That's what hit my mind. Not today. We're not going to have an experience today before I get there to speak. And that hits me. And all of a sudden I do a self-reflection. I figure, what happened to me? I hate this guy, and all he did was eat a sweet roll. So then I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, it's like the devil, how easy it was for him just to wrap me up, and I'm done for the flight, in terms of God. And I'm thinking about it, and I thought, man, I'm a nut job. Like I kind of glance over at him now and then. I figure, no, he's got the headphones on, so we can't talk. But I thought, what happened to me? And so literally, we're leveled off, and the movies are going to start. Instead of leaving his headphones on to watch, he takes his headphones off. So I thought, here's my opportunity. So I turned to him, I said, hey, how are you doing? Well, you can imagine what that felt like to him. You get some antisocial twit sitting next to you, and all of a sudden he wakes up and he's Mr., like bipolar or whatever. I don't know what happened to him. And so I said, how are you doing? He looks at me shocked. He says, fine. And I says, where are you going? Well, I'm going to Washington, D.C. What are you doing there? Now I get the human part of me is getting fulfilled. So I says, what are you doing in Washington, D.C.? Well, he says, I'm a professor at a university in Washington. And he said, I'm on loan 2 weeks a month to the U.S. Energy Commission. So I'm going back there for the committee for 2 weeks. I said, oh, really? So what kind of decisions do you have to make? So I'm asking him all these questions. And he's answering, and he's kind of enjoying the fact that I'm interested in what he does and stuff. And then he turns to me and he says, so where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to, it's near South Bend, Indiana. It's a university. Or what are you doing there? I said, well, I'm going to be speaking. He says, well, speaking, I said, well, like Christian topics. Because he asked, what are you, Christian? Oh, so you're a Christian. Yeah. Well, I'm an atheist. So I thought, ooh, okay. He got that one out really quick. I'm running out of time. Make a long story short. We get talking a little bit, and you could tell he's like, no, I'm an atheist, and you're a Christian. This isn't going to go very well. And so I just said, well, on that note, I said, do you mind if I share my belief system versus yours? And he says, sure, go ahead. We got a long flight, so he said, go ahead. So I said, well, here's the way it works for me. I said, and I can't prove any of this. I said, and whether God's real or not is totally irrelevant. Do I think God's irrelevant? No, but if I'm going to meet an atheist, that's where I start. So I said, here's what it is like for me. I believe I was created. Now, I can't prove that. But I said, you know what that it does? Just the belief, forget about whether God's real, just the belief says, maybe there's a reason or purpose in my life. And I said, you know what that does for me? It gives me power, it gives me a competitive edge over everybody else in business, just because I believe there's a reason or purpose for my life. And I said, now here's the next thing. I said, I believe at the end of my life, I look forward to eternal life. I'm not going to get into the state of the dead stuff, but I said, I look forward to eternal life. Can I prove that? Absolutely not. And whether God's real or not is totally irrelevant. But you know what it does for me to have that belief system? It gives me hope. And I said, so I go through life with a purpose, a sense of relevance, a sense of reason to live, and at the end of it, I have hope towards the end of it. No, I said, if you don't mind, I'll tell you what you believe. Sure, go ahead, he says. I said, you believe you evolved from a lower form of animal life. I said, you know what that does for your purpose? I said, it slams the door. There is no reason for you. Whether God's real or not is irrelevant. You have no reason, no purpose whatsoever to live because you have no belief that there's a reason. And I said, furthermore, I'll tell you what your life's like. It's a life of rat race, survival of the fittest. I know it's going to be that for him. It's a rat race, survival of the fittest. I said, you're going through life trying to create money, trying to create assets, trying to get toys, and you're going through your life trying to hold all this together, everything that you're getting, and at the end of it all, you die, you rot in the ground, and all your family fight over your assets. That's all you have. And I said, whether God's real or not is totally irrelevant. My belief system gives me something, yours gives you nothing. He said, whoa, yeah, whatever. And I said, furthermore, I said, I find this really interesting, and I had my Bible in my backpack. So I said, I'm not here to preach. Not this Bible, but I had it along, but I had a small one. And so I said, I'm not here to preach, but I said, here's what I'd like to, maybe you can help me. Here's my dilemma with the Bible thing. I said, not here to preach. I said, here's what I find interesting. This is the most controversial book written in the history of literature. Everywhere it is, there's fights over it. There's still fights whether it belongs in the libraries of the public high schools in the United States here. I said, what I don't understand, and maybe you can help me, is those who don't want it in the libraries, those who are fighting against it, say that the book is fictitious and it's a myth. I said, so what I don't get, my King James Version Bible should sit on the shelf next to Shakespearean writing as fiction with no more threat to society than Shakespearean writing. Why would anybody care if they want to say that it's fictitious and yet you're going to fight against it? I said, I don't get it. Can you help me? And I said, so what do you think? If it were real, what do you think the results would be? I asked him that. He sits there and thinks about it a long time. He said, I would assume there's controversy. I said, that's right, because it's legit. So we talked about a whole lot. I asked him, I said, have you ever had any religious exposure in your life? Because I like to get that out, because I don't know where to start with some of these atheists, But 80% of all the atheists I meet have had a religious exposure somewhere in their life. And he says, yes, I went to a Catholic parochial school for part of my education, and because it was so rough, this school, not rough in terms of bullying and all that, but the way they disciplined the people and everything. He said, then we went to a Presbyterian school for 2 years in Florida, and he said, and that's been it. Anyways, we talked about a lot. I shared a lot. I shared my testimony of chasing and pursuing, and it was nowhere. And I finally found God in a real way. I said, religion sucks. I told him that. I said, religion is a waste of time. And he agrees with me on that. But I said, what I discovered, there's a difference between religion and having a connection directly with God. That's what I discovered. It changed my life. I said, religion was terrible for me. But God is amazing. So, anyways, we do all this talking. And he says, here, have you ever seen the movie Space Odyssey 2000? I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, that's really logical, the way that all started, maybe in the beginning. And yeah, whatever. I let him talk about his theories and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, so we're talking. He's really warming up to all this talk. And so as we're landing into Chicago, I know the Spirit's been working on him, and the Spirit's been doing the talking. I can't come up with this creative stuff. So we're heading down, starting to descend. And I said, can I challenge you? We traded business cards. Here's first. We traded business cards. I said, I'd like to keep up with you. I give him my business card. And I said, here's what I want to offer you as we're descending. I said, I want you to spend an hour a day reading the Bible. I said, I will guarantee beyond any shadow of a doubt that after 2 months, your life is going to explode. Within 2 months, your life's going to explode with relevance. I said, I mean it. So every hour you log, whatever the university pays you, I will give you a check for that much money for your wasted time if your life doesn't explode with relevance. He says, wow, that's an offer. I said, I mean it. This isn't just some joke. I'll pay you if you go do this. He says, wow, yeah, no, unreal. He lands, we both land. He goes off to D.C., I get my flight over to South Bend, Indiana. And I start, because I have his contact, I start emailing him some references, scriptural references to read. Deuteronomy 28, talking about the blessings and the curses and different things. God wants to give you John 10:10. So I'm giving him these texts to read that God's got some good stuff in store for you. So I sent him a few things. And this is why Tammy asked me this. She says, do you have that story along? I said, yes, I do. It happened to me in my Bible. I looked and found it's here. This is a letter I got from him 10 days later. An atheist. Herb, it was nice to hear from you, because I was sending him this stuff. Not surprisingly, given your track record, because what I did when I was telling him these stories, I said, I met this person, I met that billionaire, and I met them, and their life changed. So I wanted to give him some real live examples, not just some possibly a nut job. Not surprising, given your track record, you had a real influence on me. While in D.C., I spent some time each morning with the Bible for the first time in years. Last time was when he was in parochial schools. I also started to develop a prayer list for the first time in decades. I started listing what I wanted to pray for those closest to me. Interestingly, by the time I got to the third person, I found I couldn't go on until I had added a line for each person summarizing what I could do to help these things come about, as if God had said, not so fast, we're in this together, bucko. Those are his words. I also developed a little prayer to use as part of my Covey weekly and daily planning. I didn't know what that meant, but apparently there's a planner called Covey, whatever. Seeking guidance from God, and I've shared this with two other guys here interested in a mutually supportive weekly meeting to help each other stay on track. While we're talking, we had lots of time, he told me about, he's gone for 2 weeks a month anyways, but he says, I hardly have a relationship with my kids. My marriage is in shambles. And so he's just telling me, life sucks. And so anyways, this week, I have tons of meetings and deliverables, and I'm scheduled to go with my daughter's class for a 3-day field trip. I was feeling totally overwhelmed. In other words, and then he says here, not my MO, not my modus operandi, to go with my daughter to a 3-day thing. Then he talks about his son, 31 parents for 50 kids. His kid's doing a 21-mile bike-a-thon. I'm going with my son. Now, here's how he ends, and this was big relief to me, because what deal did I make with him? I said, I'll pay you if it doesn't work. As I lay all these things out in this email, I am struck by how much I am changing, and largely due to my chance meeting with you. Thank you very much. I'll check out those scriptures. I hope your trip went well. What do you think means more to me in a reflection in my last number of years? To get a letter like this guy from some random meeting on an airplane, random, could be coincidence, could be incidents, could be providence. To have a random meeting with the guy on an airplane, you know what he does? I phone him 6 months later, he's teaching Sunday school at a Foursquare Gospel Church. Yeah, I wish he believed what I believe, but you know what? He's in God's hands. Holy Spirit's very capable. So the thing is, to reflect on that or hundreds of others, what do you think gives me more a sense of relevance, of purpose, of what I want to do with my life? That or going and land another $1 million deal? I'm trying to retire from the $1 million deals because they bring me no fulfillment. So the point is this: I'm not special. I'm not intellectual. My high school grades of D student all the way through will tell you that. I've got no edge. All I have is spend a serious amount of time with Jesus every day, digging through the Word like gold. I like prospecting. I don't never go any beyond just seeing a few color because I'm not that passionate. But God doesn't want us gold fever. He wants us to have God fever. Go after the mother lode. Just spend time with Him and let Him dictate your future. Let Him set you up with divine appointments. Open your mouth and realize, as dumb as I am, amazing things come out of here, so it can't be me. It's divine appointments, and then it's Holy Spirit-driven conversation. And there's nothing to worry about. I want to tell you this. As for me and my house, as Joshua said, we will serve the Lord.